3, 2, 1.
Here we go!
Welcome to the System and Soul Podcast, a place for founders and entrepreneurs to discover breakthrough in their business. I'm Benj Miller, fellow founder, business coach, and your host. This is your place to gain clarity and control as you lead through the challenges you face every day in your business. Running a business is just hard, so we're bringing you the conversations with people who are figuring it out, have figured it out, to help you find breakthrough. Welcome to the System and Soul Podcast. What's up, System and Soul? Today we've got a fun conversation, and I'm going to recap this whole thing because really we talk about three things, but they all come down to this idea of power, and power coming from pause, power coming from asking the right questions, and power coming from courage. So super fun reconnecting with a longtime friend of mine, Kristi Turner, on this podcast. I think you'll enjoy it. And there's a lot of little nuggets woven through here that you can take and use in your life, in your career, in your leadership, maybe even your parenting. So enjoy it. Let us know what you think. System and Soul, welcome back. We got a fun conversation because we have a fun guest today. I want you to meet Kristi Turner. Kristi is she's been a lifetime marketing leader and has transitioned into now a #1 best-selling author and executive coach, consultant, investor, advisor, jack of all trades. But maybe master of a few, and really wanted to get her on here because, like I mentioned, best-selling author, her new book, Rethink Everything, The Courage to Lead Differently, so aligned with everything that we talk about here on the podcast. So Kristi, welcome to the show. And as always, we've got to kick it off with something we can't Google about you.
That used to be a long list until I wrote a book and put some personal stories in there. But I'm going to go with I am the creator of the What Family Olympics, which is 12 years running.
Well, what is the What Family Olympics?
What, as in WHUT, which is 4 last names of myself and my siblings. So the Wilson, Hammelrick, Oldsparq, Turner Family Olympics, it consists of about 25. There's 10 events. It gets seriously competitive. And there is a recap video every year. And it has become an infamous annual event in our family.
Is this like a family reunion?
Thanksgiving is like a family reunion, but that's just my siblings and our kids. So there's 16 grandchildren. There's 4 siblings. It's the grandmothers, 25, and we compete. We train for it. And there are arguments about what events.
Yeah.
We change it up a little bit every year, but it's not a casual family Olympics. It is a serious Olympics. There are medals, there are winners, there are losers.
That's amazing. We did that with a group of friends a couple years ago. I think it was pre-COVID, and everybody was like, sick of being cooped up. And so we just had a few families over, and my wife made up all these games. And one of them was you put a tennis ball in the feet of a pair of pantyhose, and then you put the pantyhose on your head. So now you have these 2 dangly balls, and it's 1-on-1. So in between you have a stool with a water bottle on it, and whoever knocks the water bottle off with the tennis ball first wins. So this is going on a few rounds. Like, we've got different ages of the family members competing. And then I was up against another dad, and I thought it was a genius move. They make fun of me for this to this day, but I'm like, well, why don't I just go box him out and then I can hit it off? And so I do that, but nobody was expecting that. So I absolutely knocked him to the ground, and here I am taking something benign and making it like a contact sport. So they have not let me live that one down.
But is there video, Benj? Is there video of it?
I wish that would make the rounds. I do not have video of that.
The video captured moments are really important because you get to relive, because people get a little insane and competition.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And they get inventive like you, right?
What do you pay somebody to come video record the whole thing, or is it everybody's just pitching in and using their cameras?
No, I have my daughter and one of my nieces usually takes the reins of the video, and they're brilliant at it. But no professionals. This is a family event on the side of a mountain somewhere, and it's just hysterical.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. All right, podcast over. Everybody go have a family Olympics. That's a win. Your book. Tell us how this happened. Why? I know from experience that a book is an act of love. It's not something you do to get famous and get rich. It's really something that's in you that needs to come out into the world. So what was that for you, like that motivated you through this process?
Yeah, it was a labor of love. As you know, and I know, there isn't a financial ROI on books. It's usually an investment of time and money. And it definitely was a labor of love. It had been in the making, I would say, subconsciously for 10 years, and finally had the time to dedicate to it. We sold our technology company in mid-2021 and made it through COVID. I've been working since I was 14 years old, and I'm 53. And it was a great time to take a sabbatical, as I talk about in the book. I took a year off. I took 2022 off. And I have never not worked. I've never gone 200 miles an hour. Didn't know what it was like, and dedicated it to writing the book. And I really, the intention of the book was to give back. At this point in my life, it felt like a good time to pause and kind of capture, like, how did I get here? And how did I become the leader I became? And where did I fail? And where did I succeed? And it really became a book I wish someone had written for me in the beginning of my career. Yeah. And it just kind of has these golden nuggets about business and life, kind of how we lead ourselves and those around us. And I say that to say my definition of leadership may be a little bit different than others.
Bring it.
I think leadership is the obvious leadership, which is executives and corporations. But I also think being an aunt is a leadership role. I think being a parent is a leadership role. I think an hourly employee on the front line can be a phenomenal leader. So when I say leadership, this book is not for leaders only, although I hope every C-suite and every board director and board member and investor reads it. There's some great insights for them. It's also for, anybody that is a parent or working, because we do a lot of storytelling in both. And one of the things I found was parenting and leading in corporate America. There's a lot of similarities and a lot of lessons I learned from one that I applied to the other, and vice versa.
Yes.
And I think you can relate to that, having children and all the businesses you have created.
Yes, 100%. They make me better at the other one, both of them. So, all right, super fun. I'm looking forward. I'm so curious what's on your mind today. So as always, we're going to talk through what are the top 3 things on your mind that you're wrestling with, challenged by, learning, wanting to share with the world. Maybe they're from the book, maybe not.
So I would say I'm kind of on a mission to share this kind of philosophy of Rethink Everything, which is really around getting leaders and individuals to really pause and assume the status quo might be wrong. And start asking questions, right? Is there a better way? Why are we doing this? What if we did this? Yeah. And then have the courage to actually do something different. And so those are kind of the 3 things that are really top of mind. We don't pause enough, right? We kind of schedule ourselves in this hustle culture. Yeah. And I'm sure your calendar maybe looked like my calendar for many years, where it was 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. It was back to back to back to meetings, and you're reacting, right, to all the things coming at you, emails coming at you, meetings coming at you. And I started scheduling pause time to create to innovate. And I don't think it's a mistake that our best ideas come in the shower or exercising or sleeping.
Yeah.
And it's that pause. That's where the genius is. And I think
absolutely.
We get so busy as parents, right? We overschedule our kids, we overschedule our families, and saying no and creating some pause time, whether it's meditation, whether it's just time to just kind of think out of the box. That's where the best ideas come from.
Yeah, for sure. It was like this mystery to me in the first part of my career, why all my good ideas came in the shower or falling asleep at night. And then I realized, well, that's the only time I sit there and think by myself. So yes, you've got to create that space. And there's been a lot kind of written about the creator's calendar versus the manager's calendar, which is what comes to mind when you're saying that. And I think that, the leader's calendar needs to look more like the creator's calendar than the manager's calendar.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And I think it's not just, it's to your point, it's time alone, right? When you're a parent and you work, when in your calendar do you have alone time? Very little. And so carving that out, but also I think it's, like creating joy in your everyday life, whether that's laughing, whether that's time with people you love, whether that's doing something you love. We tend to give our kids permission to take guitar lessons or horseback riding or soccer. What do you want to do? What are you interested in?
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
We don't give ourselves that permission, and it's like, hey, I'm a family of 4. How many kids do you have?
4.
4 kids. So you're
kids.
A family of 6?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, binge. We'll talk offline on how you do that. I only have 2 kids, aunt of 14, but a parent of 2. And I think that I started going, wait, this is a family of 4. So, okay, you can have like Monday and Wednesday, 2 hours to go do this great, interesting, hobby that you are, but where's my 2 hours?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so and I think it changes the family dynamic when you carve out, when they see you doing something that you're either learning or it's just fun and joyful. For me, it was horseback riding. I think it teaches your kids a lot. So it's just looking at that calendar, to your point, very differently.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I need time to create. I need time for kind of joyful. I need time to learn something different.
So there's always a tension with these conversations because by whatever measure, you've had a very successful career that you went 200 miles an hour through. So on the other side of it, to have the wise old sage say, hey, it's better if you don't go 200 miles an hour, but that's actually what got you to the place you are. So there's this tension of if you rolled it back, 15 years, and had the wisdom you had now, would you still go 200 miles an hour?
Yeah, I think, I'll give myself a little bit more credit than that, in that there were ebbs and flows, and that, yes, I did go hard and I did produce, and I was a member of the hustle culture. But when you read the book, you'll see that the way I thought and challenged the status quo, again, when I was in my 20s, when I was in my teens, when I was in my 30s, when I was going at such a fast pace, I would pause and I'd go, this doesn't make sense to me. This doesn't seem fair. This doesn't seem right? When I would take over a new job where I was naive or I didn't know what I didn't know, I just sit there and observe. I would listen. So the pause is not always not participating in the hustle culture. The pause is like, as you are doing a new job, or as you are walking into a new company, or you're helping a client, to just listen, right? Ask the right questions first and then listen. And that's just as much of a pause scenario as, to your point, in this season of my life, I was very privileged to be able to take some time off of work. But again, I worked from 14 to 53 without stopping. So, it's just, what do you define pause? And I think that even when you're really busy and you're with young kids, it's funny, we can always find some time. We just got to turn off that TV, put down the phone. There's time in a day.
I agree.
Right?
I agree. Yeah, it's a prioritization issue, not really a time issue. That's awesome. So the number one thing that is on your mind is getting people to slow down and pause.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's not say necessarily slow down, right?
Okay.
Because we just gave an example where it wasn't really slowing down. It was pausing and asking questions.
Right.
Right.
Good clarification.
And listening and listening. So it's kind of twofold. Yes, it's great when we can pause and slow down and meditate and have time to ourselves and all those things. But also because I think you brought up a really, really good point. Like, great, Kristi, not everybody can slow down, right? I've got 5 toddlers running around. I've got, crazy life. But, saying no to things and pausing and asking questions. So let's give some examples to address that. So we just talked, let's give a personal and a professional example. So personally, do our kids need to be involved in everything they're involved in, or is that more status quo? And can we say no? Right. So I was guilty, just like all the other parents, and hearing from parents, you got to do this and they got to do this. And, oh gosh, if you want them to have a chance to play soccer in college, they got to be on the club team and they got to do it year round. Do they really? And what percent of our kids really play in college? Could we say no to certain things and buy ourselves some time? Yes. And then I'll give an example. One of the things when I was taking over a new team or a new role in a company was to literally just interview everybody around me in my sphere of influence. That could be the team that was reporting to me. That could also be my co-execs and their teams. Yeah. And just pause before I started coming in and making policies and changes. It was to pause, ask questions, interview, ask, why are we doing this? And what ideas do you have? Yeah. Right. And listen. There's so many leaders that don't listen. And I would just sit back and listen. And every single time without fail, we would find something that the company or my team was doing that didn't need to be done. Yeah. Right. And so one quick example is a guy on my team was producing this report. It took him 5 hours a week to produce it. It went out to the whole company or most of the execs, and nobody was reading it. And so the first thing I did was say, stop doing the report. And he's like, we've been doing it for 10 years. We can't stop doing the report. I said, stop doing it. If anybody wants it, they'll ask us for it. And he was so uncomfortable, right? Because again, we've always done it that way. We've always done this report. But stopping that report literally bought him 5 hours a week, 20 hours a month. It saved the people reading the report more time. Right. So say no first to buy yourself time. Yeah. And so I think we tend in our society to do a lot of unnecessary things. And so I would say pause and say no, ask questions, hear the ideas, and then implement the ideas, but do time saving first. Yeah. And that kind of buys you the time to do the more important things or the new ideas. Yeah.
Cool. I'm glad you cleared that up because you're right. It's more about go fast and recover hard than slowing down. Hey listener, I wanted to take a second in the middle of this episode to take a time out and tell you about one of our partners. The key to running a successful organization is having a bench of leaders you can rely on, but building leaders can be daunting and costly. There's not enough time in the day for you to mentor every person on your team, and it takes a lot of effort to gather resources and measure leadership growth in your people. That's why Wildsparq created a scalable leadership development system to grow your people in a consistent way.
Each month, your people will hop online, learn essential leadership skills tailored to your organization's goals. Then your team will meet together and discuss practical application. It's a turnkey leadership development system that's scalable, sustainable, and strategic. Your people are the key to your success. Invest in their growth with Wildsparq. Learn more at wildsparq.com. That's WILDSPARQ.com. That's Wildsparq with a Q.com.
What's number 2 on your mind?
So number 2 is, let's just talk about asking the right questions, right? So, we tend to inherit what we've been doing for so long, or what others are doing is probably even more of the issue. So what kind of questions do you ask? And, sometimes when you are looking at the status quo in the work environment or in a parenting environment, you get a lot of shouldas, right? We all have a lot of shouldas. You should do this, you should do that. And then just start asking why, why are we doing that? And why do we need to do that? And is that really necessary? Or is there a better way, right? And, am I the one that can change it?
Yeah.
And again, I say this, I'm not talking about top down, leaders, but frontline employees. You're in the front line, you're with the customer, the broken things, right? What product innovations the customer's screaming for. What frustrates the customers. So how can you make a difference in that company? How can you communicate it? How can you help the customer by changing something internally to the customer? Or as an employee, there's a lot of things you may dislike about the culture, right?
Yeah.
And other employees feel the same way. So what can you do to change it? And again, leadership is so much more than the hierarchy organizational chart. So you ask why, and then you ask, what if we did it this way? What would happen?
Yeah.
What's the pros? What's the cons? What could we do? And then you take that, to a bigger, broader, and it really just starts making you think very differently. Take an industry like our educational system. Why do we teach, who the presidents are for 12 years in a row, but we don't teach entrepreneurship. We don't teach interview skills. We don't teach household management. We don't teach how to be a parent. We don't teach financial 101, right? You just start asking, is there a better way? Right.
Absolutely.
And then how can we change it?
I've got a fun example of the power of asking the right question. The leadership team I was with yesterday were frustrated because they would ask people what would you change about this organization? What should we change? And everybody's always like, oh, it's great. We love it. We love it. Their next survey, they stated it like this: I love working here except fill in the blank. And all of a sudden they got all of this insight about what it was really like to work there, where the areas of improvement were, and people just with that little bit of permission to say, yeah, here's the one thing that, everything's great, but this one little thing could be better. It just freed people up. And it was all about the way that they rephrased that idea, rephrased the question.
Well, I love that, because I think you're touching on a couple of things there, right? Which is, even the best leaders have great intention of wanting to know what their employees think. And there's employee surveys and there's this, but by the nature, regardless of the leader, right? By nature, there's a hierarchy in corporate America, right? And it's scary to tell a boss what's wrong with the organization, the culture.
Yes.
And even if the leader is open, people are going to be careful with their words, right? There's ramifications of speaking up, right? They
Absolutely.
can be good, they can be bad, but it's risky. And so, a lot of companies do anonymous employee surveys, but to your point, they ask the question in the wrong way. So like if a boss asks you, would you work for me again? And you don't really want to work for them, what would you say?
Right.
The
What are your
only
options?
answer is yes, right? Like, what are you going to do? But if you ask, hey, as a leader, we all have strengths and weaknesses. I want to know my weaknesses and I want to do better. Can you tell me something I could work on? That's to your point, it's a different question. Or when I was writing the book, I had 30 people pre-read the first draft, which wasn't that great, right? And the first draft's never that great. And I didn't say, what did you like about the book? I asked, where did I lose you? And where'd you get lost?
Yeah.
So I have to edit this down by 30 or 40%. I need to know where to cut, right? And it forced them to give me sections to cut, which they're not going to cut something they liked. They're going to cut what they got bored with.
Right.
Oh, this, but they're not going to feel comfortable saying, this was really boring, Kristi. This whole section was really boring. But when I kind of asked, I need to cut big chunks. So I need to know areas where I lost you.
Yeah.
Where would you cut? Then you get great information, right?
Yeah, that's great. I'm stealing that right now. Very timely. Taking notes. All right. The power of the pause, the power of asking the right question. Number 3. What's the third thing on your mind?
Right. We've probably touched on this a little bit indirectly in the conversation we just had, but it takes courage to give feedback to upper management.
Yeah.
It takes courage to lead when you're not in a leadership position. It takes courage to lead when you're leading. And it takes a lot of courage to change things that have been done a certain way for 10 years, even if it's something like stop doing a report, right? Which just seems super simple, but it's uncomfortable, right?
That's right.
And so it takes a lot of courage to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. And change is uncomfortable for humans. There's very few or a small percent of us. I think you may be one of them. I may be one of them. I love change, right? I kind of thrive on it.
Right.
But it took me years to embrace change, right? I wasn't born loving change. But the majority of humans are very uncomfortable with change.
Yeah.
And so part of leadership is helping individuals through changes like mergers and acquisitions in corporate America, or a child, when you bring in on that second, third, or in your case, fourth child, getting the other children used to this new child that's coming in. I mean, change, it's a transition. And I think most people are uncomfortable. And so having that courage to kind of get through change, or even be the one to ignite change. And again, go back to like a frontline hourly employee trying to ignite change upwardly.
Yes.
That takes courage.
Yeah.
But those are where the brilliant ideas are.
Yeah.
Right.
That is, and we go back to like, there's so much talk about vulnerability in the workplace. Mm-hmm. And I think most people go to like the place of that, meaning sharing my feelings. Right. But the vulnerability, I was coaching a young mentee this morning, and he was given this huge project, and he kind of found the problem that they were trying to fix was really a person, not a systemic issue. Mm-hmm. And so he's like asking, like, how do I bring this up without, putting myself at risk, or, relationship at risk? And we were talking about through that, but really it came down to this. It is courage, and it is the vulnerability, and to see how does the organization respond to that? Because in some organizations, there is no tolerance for that. Mm-hmm. Like, and so you learn quickly, well, I'll just keep my mouth shut. In great organizations, you're rewarded for surfacing reality and having the courage to say the thing nobody else will say. So I think that there's how we lead in vulnerability. There's also a huge part of the courage as a leader to hear the hard feedback and not take it personally. so that we can appreciate it, acknowledge it, and maybe even reward the person that's willing to be vulnerable and bring those things up.
Yeah.
It's a whole nother ball game.
I think that's a brilliant point, because I don't think we can be naive. That I would even go so far to say the majority of cultures don't do a good job of having difficult conversations or providing leadership with constructive criticism, right? From upwardly, I think as leaders, probably as an executive, I've gone through 150 360 reviews of all the things I could do better, right?
Right.
There's all these, which are great or can be great. And I slowly learned to actually want negative feedback or constructive feedback, but that took years to develop that skill set to receive, because you get insulted. However, the average human being isn't too good at receiving criticism, but there's actually a chapter in the book, How to Have Difficult Conversations, and talking about the benefit of getting constructive feedback as a leader, to your point. I had to learn it. But again, you have to coax it out of people. And there was from the top down, the board, the CEO was really good at giving me feedback on how I could do better. And the 360 formal review was real good about, oh, here's your personality, here's this, here's how you could do better. And you get all that feedback. But from your team members, similar to what we were talking about before, it takes them a lot of courage to go to their boss and say, I wish you could do better. And you have to kind of be the type of leader that coaxes that out of people. And again, it kind of goes back to asking the right questions. It's like, hey, I want to know how I could be a better leader. And they'll start off going, oh no, you're great. And you're going, nobody is perfect. So tell me one thing I can work on. And you kind of have to get them going. And then your response to the expression on your face, to the words you say after, is critical. Like, okay, I get that. And tell me more. I guess I always like telling real life examples, because in theory, this all sounds good, but then in reality, everybody struggles. And I had a direct report tell me that she thought I maybe was intimidating to another person in another department. And I think of myself as the least intimidating person on the face of the earth. I'm like, I thought she was joking. I literally thought, I was like, me? I laugh, I smile.
Yeah.
She goes, no, you kind of come in a room and you're like a powerhouse of energy. And I think she's literally scared of you. And I just thought, you got to be crazy. And I was like, me? And I just didn't see it. So I asked her about 5 more levels of questions to understand, with the intent of understanding. I was like, can you give me examples? And the end of the story was she was exactly right. And I did not know I had that intimidating aspect of me. It was great insight. And it was just more because I come in with a lot of energy. I have a lot of ideas. As I get older, I have to speak my ideas before I forget them. So I talk quickly. And then I don't accept incompetency. So in meetings, I call incompetency, on the carpet, and can be very uncomfortable. But it was great feedback for me. And I really had to kind of sit back and go, okay, I got to change some things. That wasn't my intent, right? Yeah. And then I actually sat down with the individual one-on-one, and I said, it's been brought to my attention, and I wanted to say, I honestly didn't realize I was doing this. Let's restart this relationship, and let's talk through it. And how can I help you?
That's awesome.
And that changes the conversation, but it took a lot of courage for my direct report to even bring that up.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. And then
you did.
It helped me so much. And I made adjustments. I made changes. And, I think that's really important for leaders to be able to receive it and then adjust and not let it hit the ego.
Yeah.
But to say this helps everybody, right?
Yeah, that's super cool. I was really bad at this whole thing for the first probably 10 years, decade of my career. And at some point I learned the action for me, my mantra is just run into the mess. But the thing I have to tell myself is it's never as bad as I imagine. And it's always better on the other side. So the faster I run into it and get through it, the better it'll be on the other side. And if as long as the conversation's in my head, it's worst case scenario. But if you approach it the right way, it is never proven to be as bad as I feared.
Well, and I think that, again, we all dread those difficult conversations. And to your point, they're never as bad as you think they're going to be. And if you're kind, you're honest, and you approach it with good intentions to help the individual, right? Our job as leaders is to improve individuals, right? And so telling someone they need to level up, right? Or something's not working benefits them as an individual, it benefits your team, and it benefits the organization. So the difficult conversations have such a great ROI for every aspect, but yet, and I'd love to know your opinion on this, I think the majority of leaders avoid difficult conversations.
100%.
And so,
yes.
So we need more of us able to have difficult conversations because we're missing an opportunity to improve an individual for their next job, because sometimes those difficult conversations end in, this isn't working. This isn't a fit. Right.
Yeah.
But if you have the reason, let them understand why. 9 times out of 10, when they go to that next job, they're going to approach that next job differently. Right.
I think one of the ways I've been trying to think about this lately is going into the hard conversation, like go into it, but go into it with curiosity, which goes back to something you said earlier, because there's been a few times when I've go in, address it, hard charging, and I was missing a piece of information or a variable or something. And so I looked like an ass for the way that I brought this up. Whereas if I said, hey, this is weird, can you explain this to me? I'm starting the hard conversation, but I'm allowing room that I don't understand everything that's happening. And that always works out better.
Again, ask first.
Yeah.
Ask, listen, then speak. Mm-hmm. To your point, we're a little bit older now. In the beginning, I spoke first, right? Yeah. And then ask. But it's ask the questions, listen. And so coming into it with curiosity, so help me understand why you approached the situation the way you did.
Yeah.
And you'll usually find out something, right, that you didn't know, to your point, but then still have, again, maybe a piece of information that completely changes the context. And then it's again, that's a why and the what if. Well, what if we approach that same scenario differently and give them tools? Yeah. Because a lot of times, all of the tough conversations I've had, 9 times out of 10, the employee had never had a manager that was honest with them, that gave them really good feedback, because it's uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
So they literally don't know what they don't know because of possibly incompetent management earlier in their career, right? So it's just always, it goes back to pause, ask the questions, listen, and then have the courage to kind of go back and forth with what needs to be changed, what are ideas, what are ways in which you could have handled this differently? What can I do to help you handle it differently? I'm your boss, but my job is to serve you, right? I'm supposed to make your life easier by getting the brick walls out of the way and helping you do your job. And it's curiosity, it's listening, and those are things that don't always happen when we come in like bulldogs in a meeting or a situation.
Right. Kristi, I'm so excited for you, not just with this book release, but that you're stepping onto the platform with a larger audience to talk about all things life and leadership and the ability to rethink everything. So congratulations, everybody. You can go Amazon right now. It's not hard to find because it is at the top of the list, but we'll put the link in the show notes. Again, Rethink Everything, The Courage to Lead Differently from Kristi Turner. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Super fun.
Thanks, Benj.
All right. See you next time.